Hi, one of the upsides, I guess if there's an upside of coronavirus is being stuck at home, I've got the opportunity to pull out all the VHS videos, beta videos, 12mm films that I've been collecting for the past, well, nearly 50 years. And here's one you're going to love. This is with Pat Kenny. Pat Kenny was a #1 interview host in Ireland, in Dublin. And being the Irish, you know, they take the mickey a bit more than most people do, but watch this. This is good fun.
Now, on this job, I try to disguise my own views, try to be as fair and impartial as I can be. If I find one of my female guests really attractive, I try to mask my feelings. If I'm bored, I try to pretend that I'm really interested, and it probably works 90% of the time. But I'm afraid not with my next guest, because he's an expert on language, how we use it, how we abuse it, and in spite of our best efforts to conceal our true feelings, we give ourselves away all the time, not just by the words we use, but by every gesture, every subliminal movement of our bodies, and so on. He's written a bestseller called Body Language, and now he brings us talk language. Will you welcome, please, all the way from Australia, Allan Pease. Allan, you're very welcome to the program. I was giving them a sneak preview of some of the kind of things that you might spot about people like me asking questions. But can you really tell if someone's telling the truth or not?
Well, you can. In fact, there's two clear ways to do it. One is through speech pattern, and the second is through gestures and movements. So where we do research with groups we call professional liars, for example, lawyers, accountants, politicians, one of the things the cameras show is when people tell the truth, they use their hands a lot. And they rarely touch the hand on their face. But when they start to lie, they'll start putting their hands out of sight, it's the first thing. And secondly, you got yours in sight. Hand-to-face movement increases dramatically when people don't tell the truth. So you get things like nose touching, eye rubbing, ear pulling. So let me give you an example. If I said, for example, Pat, I really enjoyed your show. Now, maybe I had an itchy nose, so you've got to be careful not to take one of these things and say it has a definite meaning. You've got to have at least 3 gestures. So if I said to you this way, Pat, I really enjoyed your show. I could have watched you all night. You've got tremendous potential and you should come to Australia. Now we have a group of gestures that tells you probably that I wasn't telling the truth.
You were watching Claire and I in action.
Yes, I was, yeah.
Yeah, I know we cheated by letting you do that. Claire, you weren't aware that Allan was going to be looking at you. What did you make of her?
Well, Claire's a lot harder to read because she keeps herself very still. Claire, you're what we call a head mover. You use your head to drive home points, where many politicians you'll see will use a finger to drive home points, like so. And we know that if you do use a finger, that the listeners don't actually hear the words. And even under hypnosis, they can't recall what the speaker was saying when they use a finger. So we teach people like that to squeeze their finger against their thumb and open their hand. Now they talk like this, which they shouldn't do that in Greece, because that means homosexual in Greece. But in Ireland, that's okay. What Claire does, I did notice, however, you seem to have your hands fairly tightly clasped in front, which, now you've got to be careful we don't take one thing and say it has a definite meaning. This is the problem. It could mean just somewhere to put your hands. It could mean nervousness. It could mean that she takes you as sexually aggressive. You're using a crutch display there, so that could well have caused it.
I won't move. What am I doing here, tell me?
Well, this is what we call a crutch display. We find that women in business particularly find it difficult with men. That's where he'll sit back and he'll do something like this. You're doing it now.
Yeah, like this.
Yeah. Or this is an even better one, this one here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I see.
Yeah, with hands behind the head. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, and we teach women's groups, if men do this, it's a physical form of domination, you see, because a woman can't copy this without changing the conversation. So that's fairly logical. What we teach women's groups is if a man does this, rather than when he asks you a question, because it is a domination technique, rather than answering his question, you talk to his zip, and that'll cure him pretty quickly from doing that sort of thing.
Now, you've just crossed your legs like that. Sorry, Claire, I'll let you in a minute. You've just crossed your legs like that. Why?
Well, I had too much water to drink in the green room.
But is it possible, therefore, to have a sensible conversation with someone like you without giving signals? I mean, I'm trying not to move my hands and I'm trying not to do all the things, but even if I don't do it, I'm telling you something else.
Well, I find that when people talk with me, particularly since the success of the original body language, that well, people don't talk with me. They get paranoid. They think I'm reading their every move. And of course, now with talk language, they think I'm reading what they say, that I'm reading their phrases, which I guess I really am, because I'm in the business of reading phrases.
So
doing evaluation there, I see.
I was doing evaluation there, wasn't I? Tell me about the phrases then. What sort of words tell as much as you wrote about in the body language book?
Okay, well, the first thing again, Pat, is to be sure that you don't take one thing and say it has a meaning. Now, most people know that when someone's not going to tell you the truth, they'll begin to use fairly predictable phrases, including things like, well, to be perfectly honest. Now, everybody knows, and you know, when someone says to you, to be perfectly honest, how honest do you think they're really likely to be at that point?
Not very honest.
Yeah, they're likely to be actually hiding something. Or they say, well, to tell you the truth, then they lie. Or they say, look, with all due respect. And then they say something really nasty. Now, the most used cliche is, I don't want to be. Now, whatever they don't want to be, that's what they're about to be. For example, I don't want to be rude. Then they're rude. I don't want to be impolite, and then they make a sarcastic comment. Of course, politicians need this type of language or they couldn't survive.
Yeah. Is it possible to filter all this stuff out of your conversation? For example, in Ireland, there are local things. We say, you know, all the time. Why do we do that? Or in North County Dublin, they say, whatchamacallit all the time. I'm going to, whatchamacallit, the match.
Yeah.
And why do we do things like that?
Well, that's probably because they've forgotten what it's called. Nothing very scientific behind that, Pat. The phrase, you know, kind of and sort of, probably, they're fairly commonly used too, not only in Ireland. They're probably the most insidious phrases in the English language, because by saying you know, what I'm saying is I'm trying to tell you that you obviously know what I'm talking about, because possibly I don't. And the difficulty is that if you use you know, particularly if you're going, say, for a job interview, the person who's listening to you is likely to think that you're not really confident in your ability to speak, and you know becomes a habit. So rather than say, well, you know, and you know, and kind of sort of, you're better off to eliminate those phrases and just have a pause while you're trying to think of some intelligent word to replace it with.
Not be afraid of a little heartbeat of silence.
A heartbeat of silence can be very, very dramatic, but you know, kind of, sort of, can in fact let you down.
Yeah. At the gestures you talked about, we had one from Greece, but is it possible that all of us, when we go on our holidays, we could inadvertently offend people?
Oh yes, you never tell a Greek guy that everything's okay in Ireland. We might start doing this.
Any other things?
Well, I guess probably one of the most offensive gestures in the European area is, this is another one, it goes like this, which in Ireland means, like most places,
A1.
It's A1, it's okay, but in places like, again, in Greece, it's a recommendation involving sex and travel. I mean, you just don't do this to people. In this part of the world, you have a gesture like this.
Yes.
Which is fairly offensive. This is probably even more offensive. In northern Greece, they have this. So you wouldn't want to hitchhike in northern Greece, for example. Run right over the top of you.
Claire, you wanted to say something there.
Well, there's a very good reason why I kept my hands clenched in my lap. The time I was on Saturday Live, somebody said to me afterwards, you were nervous, weren't you? I could tell. And I said, how could you tell? And she said, you kept picking your nails in your nose. So after that, I kept my hands to myself. But what about leg crossing like you had? What does that signify?
You're picking your nose?
Well, I think she meant this sort of thing.
Oh, you're rubbing your nose.
Yes, but that's what she said.
It's like a Dave Allen type of... leg crossing. Well, the thing about leg crossing, legs are what we call secondary gestures. But however, there are some very valuable things you can learn. For example, if you're sitting in a position like we are, if you like the person who's sitting beside you, say on a couch, we have a tendency to turn our hips towards that person. So the result is, now we have what's called a mirror image. We're sitting in identical positions. Now what that shows people who are watching us is that we've got a rapport going. And this is what happens when you're with your friends or people you like and respect. You have a tendency to sit and move like they do. If you don't like somebody, so if I didn't like Claire or she didn't like me, I might cross my body away, but to be polite, I talk and turn to it like that. And I say, Claire, I've really enjoyed meeting you tonight. The conversation's being honest, to tell you the truth.
I want to show you some clips we have here now. This is the first one is of a politician. You'd never have heard of him, but his name is Albert Reynolds, and he was on this program with me last year. So let's have a look now. If you look at the screens. Now, to quote the American presidency, you're a heartbeat away from the leadership, you know? I mean, that's what they say, and I don't mean that in any negative sense, but it is true. You're almost at the pinnacle of potential power.
We have a very good leader in Mr. High at the moment. He's leading the country in the right direction. He's doing a good job. I never, no, never in my wildest dreams. When I worked for Borden and Munna, I never thought I'd end up as Minister for Energy in charge of Borden and Munna. When I worked for CIE, I never thought I'd end up as Minister for Transport. Certainly not. When in various times through life, I never really believed I'd end up where I am. But I accept any challenge that's put to me. I give it my best shot, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm prepared to pay the price.
That was me and Albert Reynolds there. What did you make of our performance?
Well, your performance is fairly straightforward. You've got one gesture that you tend to use a lot. I'll come to this just a second. There's earlobe tugging business, which has got some very interesting Freudian connotations. With this Albert Reynolds, he seems to be a fairly straight talker. There's no cliche. Most politicians use cliche, like let me make one thing perfectly clear with all due respect to the position in the company, which means absolutely nothing, but it looks and sounds good provided you're moving your hands. He has a tendency to look to the left when you're asking that question. Now, when someone drops their eyes to the left, it shows you that they've engaged the right part of their brain. The brains, there's left and right brains, and which side you drop your eyes to indicates which part of the brain the answer's coming from. So the right part is an emotional side. So whatever the question was, he was obviously giving an emotional type answer, as opposed to if you asked him a technical question on finance, he might drop his eyes to the right, indicating he's engaged the left part of his brain.
So he has an emotional relationship with Mr. Haughey, one would understand from that.
Yeah, they probably get on very well.
All right, let's have a look at the second one now. And
Actually, I've seen this second one. Can I make a few comments on that before we start?
Yes, you may.
I want you to look for a couple of things. This is Britt Eklund,
yeah,
who is a walking biological signalling system. And this ear pulling thing, I noticed watching some of your shows, because I got them sent over, you have a tendency to pull at your earlobe. Now, the earlobe, we're the only animals, only primates who have earlobes, like chimps and monkeys don't have these things. And the purpose of them is as a display signal for sex. And there's an acupuncture point, which means if everybody squeeze your earlobes, do this. Now notice you'll feel it in another part of your body. When you do this, you feel it someplace else. Yeah. So if a guy is looking at a woman who he finds, pretty good, he'll start pulling at his earlobes, thinking, "Oh boy, what a honey she is." So with that in mind, we probably pay us to have a look at this clip.
All right, let's have a look at Britt Eklund on the show last year.
Okay. I have to tell you that I mean, you must be fit, because you see, I look at people's faces and I can tell if they have bad habits or not. And I said before when we went on the air, no, I said before we went on the air, I said, Pat looks very, very good. He doesn't have that sort of boozy jowl or the sort of...
All right, tell me about her.
I think you just told us all very clearly about her.
All I realise now is that I blew it.
Yeah, you probably did.
Yeah, I want to bring it down to some of our audience. Really, come down, sure. Alan, have a look. Stop! No, stay in your position. No change. Let's go down and see what we can make of the positions they find themselves in.
Well, if you look along the front row, you'll notice we've got a lot of people with their hands folded. Now, this is a potentially defensive position, probably because they're all in the front row, and you've got them along here as well. This is a fairly proud man here doing a crutch display. Again, you'll notice that the only two men in the front row have both got the same position, with arms crossed. The interesting thing, one has got left on top of right, the other has right on top of left. About 70% of people in this country cross left arm on top of right when they cross it.
Yeah.
You're the same. Everybody try that, just see how you go. And to show you how, just cross it again. That's a right brain. Now try this exercise, uncross and go the other way around. How does that feel?
Doesn't feel comfortable.
50% of the population can't in fact take that. Now this is a potentially defensive gesture. Now where you've got to be careful, let's say you go to a nightclub, right? Because you like nightclubs. I heard you before. You go to a nightclub and you see a woman who's very attractive, right? So you start pulling at the earlobe just to get things going. Let's say she's got her arms crossed. You don't want to say, look, she's negative because she's got her arms crossed, because she might be standing under the air conditioning. So if she's got her legs tightly crossed, she might have had too much to drink as well. You've got to be careful that you don't take one thing and say it has a meaning, which could be the case here, that we have... in fact, everybody's got their arms crossed, look. Everybody's got the barrier up in front in case we pick on them, which is...
Yes, they actually have their hands in their laps.
Yeah.
And they haven't got them crossed like we asked them to do a moment ago. They all actually have them right down, sort of in that area.
Also, if you look around, you'll see a few people rubbing their chins. See the fellow with red tie? He's thinking, I wonder if I believe this or not.
Can you see fear, naked fear in any of the audience? You know, are they afraid he's going to ask
Well, this
me a
fella
question?
here, look, you see the big smile on his face, laughing his head off. He's terrified. He's trying to make it like he's having a good time, but he's hoping like hell we don't pick on
We're
him.
giving all these signals, and you've written about it, but do we know when someone else is giving them to us? Do we recognise them
Well,
subliminally? Because
well,
there's no use in
yes.
giving them unless someone's picking them up.
Well, that's true. It depends on whether you're a man or a woman. Women pick these things up and decode both talk language and body language without any training, and they call it women's intuition. In fact, a woman could walk into a party this size, and she'll look around, takes her about 4 minutes, she has worked out the relationship between every man and woman in that room. She's worked out who the bitches are, who the competition is. She's worked out who had a fight before they came and who's trying to eye off who. Whereas the men walk in and see none of that and just try to impress somebody.
So we're fools, basically.
Well, not we're fool. I wouldn't say that about
Why are you
Irish
putting your
people
hand
at
in
all. I'm not taking any chances. I'm just looking at some of these women here. That really I keep thinking about Angel, actually.
She's gone to County Meath. Okay. But you put your hand in your pocket. Did you do that deliberately as a signal?
Oh, no,
Or
no.
can you help yourself? In spite of knowing all about this, can you help what you do?
No, you can't, because like we're standing here now and I'm not really consciously aware of what I'm doing or where I'm putting my hands. You said I did that before, which I guess I probably did. I've got, well, it's Irish money, no wonder. So I didn't really realise I was doing that. And that's the whole valuable key of decoding signals verbally and non-verbally, that people are not really aware from the neck down what they're doing. Now, with a face you can fake it, but with phrases you can't fake it either, that they just happen to drop out when you're feeling...
I say, I only want 5 minutes of your time. What does that mean?
Well, only tries to minimise the importance of what you're saying. If I said to you, I want 5 minutes of your time, you'd say to yourself, well, that sounds like a lot of time. But if I only want 5 minutes, that doesn't sound like very much. And of course, they use that in advertising. They say it's just $9.99, which sounds like it's not very much money.
Yeah, they said it's all of £10. It's a different story.
Well, that sounds like a lot, yes.
If I say, I'll try to be there, does that mean I've already made up my mind I don't want to go?
You've already decided you're not going to be there, and you're... Yeah, like somebody... if you ever say to your boss, the boss says, well, do this, and you say, the Prince Charles position. Yeah, this is...
Yeah, I don't know what to do anymore.
That's a good one, do that one. That's what we call the broken fly position. Don't hold my arm, like it's just very suspect.
Stay as you are. Hey, will you just stay with us for a few... Just one last thing. Before I let Claire and Alan go, Talk Language is the name of the book. How to use conversation for profit and pleasure. Profit is what people would be interested in. The pleasure can come with that. But how do you make talk pay?
Well, from a business standpoint, it's critical to be able to go to a job interview, or if you're in business where you're talking with people, to be able to put yourself across effectively and read it. And the pleasure side, of course, is just socially conversing at parties. It teaches you how to walk up to someone and get a conversation started and keep it rolling.
It certainly does, but I have to watch myself in future because we've given away all the signals, haven't we?
Keep your legs crossed.
Allan Pease and Claire Boylan, thank you very much. Look, don't go away. We have the most fascinating person to meet after the break. I guarantee you a conversation the like of which you will not have heard before. That's in part 3. That's great.